thrilled to introduce Adam Ferrier, one of the leading consumer psychologists in Australia. He's a brand strategist and authority on behavioural economics. So a lot of Adam's thinking has been brought to us in the past through his two great books, The Advertising Effect and Stop Listening to the Customer, Try Hearing from Your Brand Instead. Adam is also a Nudgestock veteran, having presented to us about 5 years ago, where he taught us about the pratfall effect, which comes in a lot of handy when you're live streaming across the planet. So thank you for thank you for arming us with the psychology of the pratfall effect. I'd also personally sort of forever in debt for Adam to sneak me into dinner with Richard Thaler. Today, Adam will be sharing his perspectives on consumer centricity, and while it might seem counterintuitive at first instances, that actually listening to our customers might be a greater risk than listening to our brand alone. Nudgestock 2020, I'm really thrilled to present Adam Ferrier.
Thanks, Sam. And Sam, being a consumer psychologist, I would say I'm one of, there's so few of us, there's only like 4 or 5 people. Anyway, doesn't matter. Thank you. Nice to be here. I'm just going to, do I start now?
Go for it.
All right. I'm here to talk about why marketing sciences suggest we should not listen to the consumer or customer. I use those terms interchangeably. The reason why I'm talking about this is because I do a fair bit of public speaking, and when you do public speaking, you get inducted on the company you're talking to, and the company always says, without doubt, we're customer obsessed, or we're putting the customer at the heart of our business. And can you talk about that? And this happens so many times across so many companies. I thought to myself, what's going on here? Are all these customers or all these companies really customer obsessed? And is that indeed good for business to be customer obsessed? And I just started to explore it a little bit. And these are some of my thoughts, and see what you think. So before we do all of that, a little test. I'd like you to imagine you are an occasional buyer of brands. So I know this is going to be hard for some of you, but just imagine you're a consumer as well as a advertising guru. And these might be some of the brands you might buy occasionally. Now, let's imagine you're an occasional consumer of them. Question 1, would you like to see significantly more advertising from these brands? You're a consumer. Question 2, would you like to spend more time on their websites and follow them more on social media and hear more about what these brands are up to? And question 3, would you like these brands to form stronger associations in your mind? So, I want you now to answer this. Who said this? I really want to see more of their advertising and spend more of my time interacting with their brand. Unless you're a psychopath or in advertising, no one says that, right? And many years ago, I still talk about it. I had dinner with Malcolm Gladwell, and I asked him the same question. And I asked Malcolm, what do you think people really want from brands? And he quite poignantly said, people would just want to be left alone. They don't want anything from brands. They just want to be there when the consumer wants them, and then they want the brand to fuck off and not be in their lives at all. So the issue with that is that's the exact opposite of how brands grow. According to Byron Sharp, no marketing activity, including innovation, should be seen as a goal in itself. Its goal is to hold on to or improve mental and physical availability. Another way of saying that is brands need to be hours. Sorry, that's my computer. Brands need to be in the consumer's face. They need to be front and center, stuck in their mind, and when they want to buy something, they need to be around them really close. That's not what consumers want. Consumers want them out of the way, out of their head, and when the time comes to buy, that they're there, which is problematic. So I want to suggest that being customer obsessed isn't necessarily good for brand growth, and I'll talk a little bit about the reasons why. But firstly, there's 2 marketers who are brave enough to put the customers last, and these two brands are quite well known. And they, although they don't say it in their propaganda, they are the least consumer-centric brands in the world. And the first one is, and it's a brand I love talking about, is IKEA. So IKEA, to make things really hard for the consumer, only have 1 or 2 shops per city or per country. So you have to travel miles to get there if you want to buy something. 2, if you do go there, here's a heat map of a particular journey. You have to spend bucket loads of time, maybe an hour, going right through the store before you can buy something. And 3, when you buy it, it's delivered unmade and you have to kind of make it yourself. So we all know Michael Norton's IKEA effect, and there's various other reasons why this is the case, but they're the grand masters of something called, relabeled, the effort paradox, which is basically the more effort you have to put into a purchase, the more you value it. I find this kind of infinitely fascinating. The second least consumer-centric brand in the world is also the most profitable brand in the world, which is Apple. So Apple have lots and lots of different dongles and cords and ways to interconnect their bits, which makes it really bloody hard to know which cord to use. 2, they have incredibly complicated payment systems, so you don't quite know what you're paying for what and when. And 3, they have extreme inbuilt obsolescence, so you're constantly having to update stuff because of battery life and so forth. They are the grand masters of creating barriers to exit. They entrap you into an Apple system and make it impossible for you to get out of that system because you have to keep on updating various bits and pieces of it. So neither Apple nor IKEA are being, I don't think, customer-centric. I think lots of their innovations are the very opposite of being customer-centric. And indeed, they're 2 incredibly strong brands. So there's 3 reasons why listening to the customer is bad. Before I get onto those 3 reasons, we obviously know that customers are not good at articulating what they want from brands. There's the Henry Ford quote and the Ogilvy quote, both are fantastic and say customers don't know what they want. We all kind of know that's not what this conversation is about. We know that they don't know what they want. But what I'm here to say is even if you could articulate what they want, it will still be bad for business. And the first reasons why is consumers want the category. They do not want your brand. So this is our bastardized version of a McKinsey loyalty loop. But basically, there's passive consideration. People going on with their lives don't care about your brand or anything. And then there's a trigger. But that trigger is for the category. And once the category occurs, A, B, C, or D pops into your head. For example, I'm thirsty. I'm not caring about anything. I'm thirsty. A few brands pop into the head. Active consideration. What brand am I going to buy? Buy C. And then there's retention. So consumers want the category. They want a new car. They want a new drink. They want to listen to the radio. They want to be entertained. They don't necessarily jump to your brand first. They jump to the category first. And there's a real life experiment. So for those of you who have bought nappies, I'm assuming that you have children. And what happens is in this real life experiment is you don't give a shit about, pardon the pun, you don't give a shit about nappies at all until you have a child. There you go, the trigger occurs. Oh, I need nappies. You're in the hospital. You've got your kid and there's a baby bunting bag. And in the baby bunting bag, there's 3 different types of nappy. There's Huggies, there's the bamboo nappy, and then there's the really cheap nappy. The bamboo, good for the environment nappy, there's the plasticky Huggies nappy, expensive, and the really cheap one. Everyone ends up buying Huggies because that's the brand that's been advertising to you for 40 years. And so you end up with that. So if we listen to the consumer, we end up focusing on category generic table stakes because consumers need the category, not the brand. So ultimately what you start to see is the homogenization of various brand categories. So over time, in Australia, all the big 4 banks start to look and feel the same and offer the same things. All the supermarkets start to look and feel the same and offer the same kind of things. And ultimately, all that we're left with is distinctiveness. So they have different colors or a different logo, but it's pretty much the same service and same design. So ultimately, I think distinctiveness is for those brands who have given up on differentiation. And one of the reasons why they've given up on differentiation is they're listening to the consumer, they're delivering what they want, but what they want is the category table stakes, and so they regress towards the mean and start to act like everybody else, and so they start to become generic. The second thing that consumers want is they want precise communications. So consumers want to be talked to only where and when and exactly at the time of purchase that they want to be communicated to. So I'm doing nothing, I want a lawnmower, right, I want all the lawnmower brands in the world to pop into my head at the right time, and then I'm going to buy the right lawnmower. But what we actually know is that brands grow by being a little bit more scattergun. We don't know all the different buyers in the category. And so we had to kind of keep on communicating to all of those different people all the time, because then we're going to be hitting every single person potentially when they're in the category. So online or offline, it's too late to build a brand at point of sale. So back to my hugging example as well. If you try to get into the consumer's mind at the only time they need that particular product, it's just too late. There's going to be another brand out there who's built up some form of equity in the headspace, and that's the brand that's going to be preferred over yours. And the third thing that really shits me at the moment is consumers want efficiency. And so if you're involved in human-centered design, or you do a lot of customer journey mapping, I really wish you wouldn't. Excuse me for one sec. It's Friday night in Australia. So these are all hideously complicated customer journey maps, and I equate all of these to fixing potholes in a road with post-it notes. So none of these customer journeys are going to end up charming the consumer or doing something wonderful. It's just going to create more efficiency for the customer. So finding little bumps in the road and flattening them out. Customers want to get in and out of the brand experience. There's a famous book about UX, which is called Don't Make Me Think. And what we also see over time, if we get more and more customer feedback, is we start to see the rough edges of things start to be ironed out and start to look neater. And we've all seen these things floating around LinkedIn and so forth, of logos when they start to logos how they are now, whether it be tech logos or luxury brands. All the rough edges get knocked off, because that's not what consumers want. They don't want to have to spend time processing why Airbnb looks like that. They just want a nice, clean font. So any A/B testing will say, yeah, I prefer the nice, clean one that's easy to process rather than one that makes me have to put the effort into processing things. Consumers want efficiency. They want it to slide in and out of their brain with as little processing as possible, cognitive fluency. The opposite of cognitive fluency is cognitive disfluency. If it's harder to process, you spend longer coding it, it sticks into the mind more. Consumers aren't going to tell you that. They're just going to tell you they want something easy. Consumers want Teflon brands. The more you listen to them, you slide in and out of their lives. So wonder, charm, humour, stickiness will come from understanding what the brand can deliver, not what from consumers want or need. So the solution, we've got this lovely equation for the solution, which is BX before EX before CX. So what's the whole brand experience? Put that before what's the employee experience, and then last of all, put that before the customer or consumer experience. And how to create a strong BX is, first of all, if you can, create the category. And I love speaking about my mate Rob and his company called OMGS. OMGS is basically a site that teaches people how to have lovely consensual sex where both partners get to have an enjoyable experience. And it's all touch screen, so men can learn how to touch the woman in a lovely way and so forth. Before he came along, there's just porn, which results in really horrible, unsatisfying sex, or sexual education, which is completely irrelevant. He's collapsed those two categories together. He's created a new category, which is pro-social kind of porn, if you like. OMG, yes. So if you can create the category, then understand the consumer as much as you want, because you're the only one in the category. So therefore, the category needs are your brand need. So go nuts. If you can't create the category, and most of us can't create the category, it's just too hard, we're not imaginative enough, or we work on brands that aren't a category of one, then put a bloody dent in the category. And by that I mean something like who gives a crap. So who gives a crap is a toilet paper based on a subscription model. There's quite a few of those out there. They donate a whole lot of their profits to building latrines in developing countries. But more than that is that their packaging is so beautifully designed. In Australia, at least, I don't know about the rest of the world, they're the only toilet paper cool enough, that looks cool enough, that people want to display the toilet paper they're using because A, it looks good, and B, they're doing good for the world. So it's not necessarily saying it's radically, it's a different category, but it's different enough to be a different type of toilet paper to everybody else. So again, if you want design-driven toilet paper, they're putting a dent in the category. Third, strong BX means firing the CEO. So many CEOs out there do not get what brand's about. This is a beautiful photo of Steve Jobs receiving a gold Effie with Lee Chow. He's executive creative director of his agency at the time. Famous stories of Steve used to ring his agency every Monday to find out how the communications was going. So Steve wouldn't necessarily, whatever he called himself, he was the chief brand officer. He understood the brand and put that above everybody else. He was a CEO who understood brand. Elon Musk is another, even more kind of potent example. Hardly has a marketing department at all. He is the chief brand officer, and the whole entire organization gets brand because the CEO gets brand. And just on this point, when I first started in marketing, all the CMOs I knew were desperately trying to understand the language of the board. I've now seen a switch where the board is now desperately trying to understand the language of the CMO. And the boards are all trying to build in marketing and innovation and creativity in their matrix structures, because they're starting to think, oh my God, the entire business needs to be brand orientated, not just a marketing department. And then finally, strong BX means employer experience before customer experience. And Richard Branson's famous for putting the employee first before the customer in terms of how they develop a brand. Mark Ritson kind of came out quite last year and said there shouldn't be a difference between the employee brand and the consumer brand. They're both the same thing. And so I kind of see these two people thinking in kind of similar parallels to each other. So that's my plea. Stop listening to the customer. Try hearing your brand instead. If you want to know more, read that. God bless you and thank you.
Adam, fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us for Nudgestock 2020. We're also joined with Rory Sutherland, the Vice Chair of Ogilvy in the UK. I think his first appearance online today. We'll obviously be seeing more of Rory as the day progresses. Adam, we're going to join you for a couple of questions, if that's okay. The first one from me, we have a few from Slido, and I'm sure we'll have a great discussion with Rory as well. First, I think, what might be the most riskiest temptation we might expect ourselves to fall in as brand owners, as product owners? What's the riskiest temptation that would fall into that might have the greatest detriment to us?
In terms of listening to the customer?
Yeah.
I think the riskiest thing is to not have a vision, not understand what the brand stands for, and then understand what the customer wants, and then try to deliver on that. And then what you'll end up doing is making yourself homogenized and detracting value out of your brand, because you're delivering on what they want, which is the opposite to how brands grow.
So start with yourself and then go to the customer.
100%. Start with yourself. Start with what you understand about yourself, and then it's not necessarily what the customer wants that's going to make what the brand grows. Whether it's in a media profile in terms of how you deliver media, or whether in terms of innovation in terms of what they want. It's more about trying to what I'm amazed at is, again, when I used to start in marketing, people used to understand their brand positioning. They understood what the brand stood for, and then they used to communicate that out to the world. I'm finding now lots and lots of our briefs are, we're not too sure what the brand stands for. Can you have a look at what the brand positioning is? And then we'll start to communicate it. That's a real worry, that so many people don't get what the actual brand is that they're trying to communicate and they're trying to use to connect with consumers. And I think because we have so much consumer data available to us, and there's so many different ways we can optimize our messaging, we focus on the consumer, and our knowledge of the consumer has gone through the roof. But our knowledge of a brand and how to build a brand, construct a brand, deliver that brand throughout the organisation is going down. And so it's just a plea to kind of rectify the balance a little bit.
Fantastic. One more question from Slido, and then Rory, love to see if you've got anything to add to the conversation. Quick question from Vinny. So UX is good or bad, all focused on listening and watching the user. And I'm wondering if we've covered some of this. I suppose it's UX in one direction, I suppose.
That's right. I think UX is fine as long as it leads to BX. So if you look at any kind of UX model or human-centered design model and say, where does brand fit into this? You'll get a blank look. And ask people on their human-centered design model, where does brand fit? And very often they won't have brand being considered at all. It's understanding the consumer and understanding the consumer journey and trying to make that easy. But the North Star of understanding the brand and how the brand should express itself is a very secondary or tertiary kind of consideration.
Rory.
Yeah, I think there may be an interesting explanation which you've uncovered, which is the importance of a borderline psychotic CEO. And this doesn't just apply, obviously, to Musk and Jobs and so forth. You could also include, by the way, Jeff Bezos, where when he proposed Amazon Prime, it was almost universally hated within the organization. People thought he was mad. And it suddenly occurs to me that what differentiates a product is actually surprisingly orthogonal or tangential to the category benefit of the product, and therefore it looks gratuitously irrelevant, and therefore the CEO will kill it. And my definition of a successful brand building company is any company that's capable of doing things which the finance director doesn't like. And since the finance director or CFO kind of outranks everybody with the single exception of the CEO, in many cases it's only by having a sort of borderline deranged genius figure CEO that you can achieve that level of differentiation by doing things which to a CEO economist's mind seem almost ridiculously pointless or indeed counterintuitive. And so there may be an opportunity if we want slightly fewer of these bonkers CEOs, but we still want successful differentiated brands. There's a massive program of CFO education, I think, that needs to go on here.
Yeah, I concur. I think the CFO would be the least likely to understand. I also reckon what the really interesting thing is, what drives the CEO to make those decisions is either a really interesting tech business angle, and I struggle with Jeff Bezos because I don't think he's brand driven at all. But I think Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and other kind of famous CEOs around the world, I think it is the brand. I think they do intuitively know what the brand's about. And I think they try to find different ways to express that, as opposed to Bezos, where I think it's just, I don't know what drives that company. That company, I don't understand at all, don't pretend to.
Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you for Nudgestock 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the session as we start to now move across into Europe over the next couple of hours.
Fantastic. God bless,
Thank
guys.
you, Adam.
Good on you.
Thanks so
Take
much,
care,
Adam.
Rory. See you, Sam.